It was a catastrophic motorsports failure when it launched onto the world stage, and yet, people are still paying tribute to it today. So the question I want to ask is why? Why do people absolutely love the little MG Metro 6R4? The British Leyland Group was Britain's auto industry titan. They had Austin, MG, Morris, Rover, Triumph, and most importantly for this backstory, Mini. The Mini is one of the greatest cars of all time and a bona fide British icon. So naturally, BMC wanted to end production and replace it. They struggled sometimes on the business side of running a business. The idea was to use some of their 1975 government bailout money to develop a new generation of Mini called the Metro. So Project Homologated Drawing Office 88-inch Wheelbase, or ADO-88, was sketched up in 1980, only for the general public focus group to absolutely hate it. This freaked everyone out, and just before midnight, BMC changed the whole thing. Basically from the ground up. The Mini was safe, thank God, while the Metro would be a compact car instead of a Super Mini, so it was one level up. It was bigger and more luxurious inside. Not Bentley luxurious, but it wasn't a $500 Honda Civic either. It even had servo-operated disc brakes up front. That's when you're getting fancy. The body was also innovative with an optional split rear seat to improve the already class-beating storage space. It would get a lot of stuff wherever you wanted to go, just not quickly. Since it was an economy car, it had at best a 1.3-liter inline-4 making 62 horsepower and 72 foot-pounds of torque. But despite the odds, it sold well, even better than the Fiesta at some times, and it was one of the best-selling cars in all of Britain. But still, Rover had a marketing budget, and they weren't going to let it go to waste, so they decided to follow everyone off the cliff and into the madness of WRC Group B rallying. A quick TLDR for those two of you who aren't familiar with Group B. Let's go back to 1974. The Lancia Stratos was the first ever purpose-built rally car, entered in WRC Group 4 competition, and then proceeded to decimate WRC Group 4 competition for the next 4 years. And it made the FIA ask the question, what if we could have a whole field of Stratoses, an entire class of homologation specials? So they created the new rallying regulations. It only needed 200 homologated road cars to compete, as opposed to the 400 from previous years. After a brief transition period in 1982 and 1983, 1984 saw the rally teams maximize the Group B, air quotes, rulebook. Audi brought their Sport Quattro, and Peugeot brought their mid-engined 205 T16. Meanwhile, BMC had been competing successfully for a while in the lower classes with their Triumph TR7 V8, but Group B was a whole different beast and a rear-wheel drive, admittedly sports car, but not exactly a performance car in the same realm as the 205 T16. They would need something a lot faster. And Austin Rover's head of motorsport, John Davenport, knew that MG did not have the experience at this level of professional motorsport, so they turned to the only logical group to help them, the Williams Formula One team. They had been in a bit of a slump for the last 3 years and accepted the gig on designing this new rally car. Clearly, it wasn't very hard for them since they also designed a double World Championship winning Formula One car at the same time. But regardless of the size, making the Metro a Peugeot fighter would be a tall mountain to climb. I mean, the fastest Metro up to this point was the 93 horsepower turbo. That's only 357 horsepower down on the 205 rally car. Clearly, they needed a better engine. enter the 3.5-liter naturally aspirated Rover V8 from the SD1. Kind of. They had to do a few modifications. So firstly, the displacement was lowered to 2.99 liters to fit into a better weight class, and secondly, they cut off 2 cylinders to make it a V6 engine so it could actually fit in the car. But it wasn't up front. No. Remember, Peugeot fighter. So, if you open the hood on a 6R4, you'll only find the spare wheel, because its engine was behind the driver. Honestly, fitting that V6 engine in the middle of an 89-inch long frame is pretty incredible, but it poses a problem usually associated with the Toyota MR2, snap oversteer. The weight distribution combined with the hyper-short wheelbase made a bit of an unstable death trap. I mean, the 6R4 was so unstable that adding 11 inches to the track width and a rear wing did absolutely nothing for the controllability, which is why the Metro has that very distinctive front wing bolted onto the air dam just to keep the thing from swapping ends at high speed. Of course, that short wheelbase did have an advantage. The 6R4 could absolutely dart into corners. It was so nimble, and it was so light. I mean, it only weighed 2,300 pounds with a V6 engine and full-time four-wheel drive. It's a very impressive machine given what the Metro started out as. And what's even crazier is that all of this had to be sold to the public. Only 200 people in the public, but that meant that 205 Clubman 6R4s were built in just 3 months to be ready for the end of the 1985 season. They cost £43,000 or 170 grand in US dollars today, but the result was spectacular. It had the crazy body kit and the four-wheel drive and the 250 horsepower V6, meaning the MG Metro hatchback, kind of, did 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds, which is faster than a Ferrari F40. It had vented disc brakes on all 4 corners and featured adjustable suspension. Think of it like the 911 GT3 RS of the MG Metro range. And amusingly, these road cars are even rarer than you think. Since they were only a fire extinguisher and a racing harness away from competition legality, most of the road cars were subsequently converted back into race cars, meaning there aren't many pure Clubmans left. It was a serious track car, which must have meant it was good at rallying. Right? Well, no, not really. MG quickly found out why the entire field used turbocharging except them. They thought that they were improving controllability by preventing turbo lag, but in fact, they failed to account for the fact that the other guys just didn't care. The drivers were good enough to manage the Fury, and the Metro's lack of pace was obvious, even with the engine tuned up to 410 horsepower in Group B trim. I mean, yeah, a fantastic third-place finish was scored on their debut, but that would be the best they ever got. I mean, their next best result was 6th at the 1986 RAC Rally, and they only scored 12 points over the entire season, getting beaten by everyone but Citroën, Opel, and Mazda. In fact, they only won a single top category rally, the non-WRC sponsored Circuit of Ireland. So they began developing a twin-turbo system to follow in the footsteps of the other Group B monsters. But it was just too little, too late. Group B was banned in 1986 after several fatal accidents, and the 6R4 twin-turbo never got its chance. At least in the WRC. You see, the twin-turbo concept was used in the rallycross scene with far better results. 700 horsepower in a super nimble chassis meant that the Metro could finally fight the Peugeots and the Fords. It scored several podiums throughout the late 80s and early 90s before taking its first of 4 consecutive rallycross wins in 1991. Cliff Humphreys ultimately won 2 events and the 1992 European Rallycross Championship 7 years after the 6R4 rolled off the line. And similar results were had in national rally championships, which has an important note about that. MG's interest in the national competition meant that another production run had to be made so the 6R4 could compete. The result was the 1987 Clubman 300. They were technically unsold models from the original 205-unit production run, only with 50 more horsepower and half the price, just to ship the things this time. And it allowed the Metro to compete until the end of the century, with its last championship coming in 1997. There was even a one-make race in 1989 as a support event for the Birmingham Formula 3000 race that weekend. But the 6R4's most famous legacy has nothing to do with MG or rallying at all. After Group B died, MG sold their V6 design to Tom Walkinshaw Racing, who in turn used it on the Jaguar XJ220. With the turbos included, the little Metro engine made 542 horsepower and 475 torque. This made the XJ220 the fastest production car in the world with a top speed of 217 miles an hour. The Metro 6R4 was a solid prototype built at the wrong time. It showed a lot of promise. The de-restricted rally prototype screamed to 60 miles an hour in 2.8 seconds at 10,000 RPM. But it broke down far too often, and its lack of forced induction meant that even an impressive figure like that was slow by comparison. But I wouldn't necessarily call it a complete disaster. Group B is littered with disasters like this: the Toyota Celica twin-cam turbo, the Opel Manta B400, the Citroen BX4TC. They all failed like the Metro in terms of actually scoring points and winning rallies. But critically, MG persisted with the Metro after Group B's demise to show the potential of the 6R4 in other classes. And it was one of the best.